Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Carrow Road. I think the rain has taken a brief pause for us, which is nice, but the weather not particularly pleasant on this bank holiday Monday as Norwich City welcome Rotherham United to Carrow Road. As it stands, I think the latest, unless someone is going to shout at me, Huddersfield are still leading Blackburn by 2-1, which would mean a victory here this afternoon for Norwich City. As it stands, would move them into the top six for the first time in quite a considerable period of time as well. Norwich, of course, hoping to build on that Good Friday victory over Blackburn here today. Plenty of injury issues, which probably leads us nicely to discuss Isaac Hayden and Sam Byram, both of whom have been spotted by our photographer, Paul Chesterton, coming off the team coach. It's going to be very interesting to see whether either are involved when the team news is announced in a minute or two's time. Norwich will obviously be without Grant Hanley, who has an Achilles issue. Ben Gibson as well, likely to miss today. But beyond that, we shall see how the team looks. Kenny McLean, of course, as we spoke about before that Good Friday win at Blackburn, out for the remainder of the regular season, at least with an MCL injury. And it is just gone 2:00, so that I would expect that means the team news does come, and it does indeed. So here we are. Isaac Hayden and Sam Byram both on the bench for Norwich City this afternoon. So they line up like this: Angus Gunn in goal, Aarons, Omid who captains the side, Sorensen and McCallum as the back four. It would be Sarah and Gibbs, I would imagine, as a midfield two, with Hernandez, Sargent and Marquinhos behind Teemu Pukki, who starts. The subs: Tim Krul, Sam Byram, Isaac Hayden, Adam Ida, Christos Scholes, Dimi Yanulis and Abu Kamara. So there we go. Just to read that Norwich 11 for you again. Gunn in goal, Aarons, Omid who's captain this afternoon, Sorensen and McCallum as the back four, Sarah and Gibbs as the midfield two, Hernandez, Sargent and Marquinhos behind Teemu Pukki. A subsequent of Tim Krul, Sam Byram, Isaac Hayden, Adam Ida, Christos Solis, Dimi Yanulis and Abu Kamara. Paddy, let's get your thoughts on that. I guess the headline news is the return of, thank you very much, of Isaac Hayden and Sam Byram both make the bench this afternoon.
Yeah, maybe a degree of needs must. And the way David Wagner was talking about it when we had a chat with him after the game on Friday was, at that point, see how they train for the rest of this sort of Easter weekend. And then, as I say, probably because of bodies more than anything else, they may or may not. He did caveat it that maybe this would come too early, and Borough this coming wet Friday would be a better game to introduce them. But I think the way the cards have fallen, the fresh injuries they've picked up, the injuries they've already had. I think off the top of my head, he said Byram had been in training for the last 10 days. This was up to Friday last. Hayden a bit longer. It might have been the role reversal, but ultimately both of those have been in and around it now for getting on for 2 weeks. So, because it is the end of the season and the games are running out and there's injuries, I think you do need to bring them back in today. And they're on the bench, so in an ideal world, you don't need them. But at least they're there as options. And what they are, despite their lack of game time this season, they're both very experienced players and two very good players. Hayden hasn't really shown it in a Norwich shirt. He would contend that's purely down to injuries and fitness issues, but that is a Premier League grade player, So, yeah, hopefully it doesn't backfire, but I think it was probably more needs must today. What I'm very happy about is that, well, yes and no, Liam Gibbs retains his place in the side, but if it is, as you've read out there, probably in a slightly deeper role, and immediately I have a reservation there in terms of Sargent and Pukki, or Pukki and Sargent, because, okay, Ida's not in there as well, but that block of 4 games post Millwall and prior to Blackburn, when it was almost shoehorning in Ida, Sargent, Pukki, it just wasn't working. It wasn't solely down to those 3, but as a mix, and it was like a veil was lifted then on Good Friday with Gibbs in the 10 and such an intelligent, technically gifted player, and with Marquinhos one side and Onel the other, and Sargent up top, it just worked, didn't it? And okay, that might be horses for courses, and the way that Blackburn set about it that day suited that formation and that template, but I still think in an ideal world you'd like to have retained that 3 and 1 behind Sargent. It's not to be, through injury, obviously, with Sorensen having to go into the centre of defence. That scenario now we'll look at for today's game on Mabama, Daly and Sorensen when they came together at Ewood Park. I think Norwich were 2-0 up at that stage. And they did what they had to do, but it's a whole different scenario really starting this game as your first choice centre-back pairing. And again, much like dropping Gibbs deeper probably loses a little bit from him in terms of going forward. Sorensen, look how heavily he was involved in both those goals at Ewood Park. So to drop him out of that midfield mix into the central defence, needs must. But I don't think it's a positive in the bigger picture of trying to build on what they showed so well at Blackburn. But that's where we're at. He had to be creative in his team selections, and I don't think he had many other options in terms of central defence. And the knock-on effect is, of course, then he needs to slot somebody in alongside Zara. Gibbs is that man. He finished the game in that deeper line role on Friday. But I go back to what David Wagner said about Gibbs earlier in the season. He didn't think physically he had enough about him at this stage of his career to play in the six. But if Hayden isn't quite ready to start, then I don't know who else could have gone in there today. So there's an element of it's the team that he had to go with rather than any major selection issues because he hasn't got the personnel. But I am pleased on the plus side of that Onel Hernandez is ready to go again, because I think when you saw him at the end of the game heavily strapping on that right ankle, which is clearly playing through the pain issue of that, I think they've had to fast track him back. But the fact he got 80 minutes on Friday, and it's a big ask for him to go again, but he's the sort of character we know he will if he's asked to do it. But just feels a very finely edged selection today. They could roll it on from Blackburn, and even the personnel changes doesn't materially impact it. But you can see a scenario where it's a bridge too far for Hernandez. Gibbs looks less effective in that deeper role, and Sorensen is what he probably is, which is a stand-in centre-back. So it could go either way. But ultimately, I think if you said to most Norwich fans, these are the players you've got available, I think most probably would have plumped for that 11, maybe slightly different formation, but those are the best 11 from the 18 available, I think, today to try and do the business and complete what would be a big Easter. Because obviously Blackburn, as we've started to record, we're still getting beat. So, as you rightly said, Connor, opportunity come the final whistle today to be in the top six. And from where we were, Connor, Huddersfield, Stoke and Sheffield United, that would mark quite a turnaround, really. And then it's all to play for. And Norwich's destiny then is very much in their own hands. So the opportunity is there for them today. Go and grab it, as they did, to be fair to them, at Ewood Park on Friday.
Yes, someone's asked about Marcelino Nunez. He, of course, is also out with an injury as well. This is the Rotherham United lineup. Obviously, the headline news there, I guess, is that Jordan Hugill not only starts, but does start from up front. Their team is Vickers in goal, Harding, Humphreys, Blackett and Bramall as the back four. They've got Lindsay, Coventry and Rathbone as the midfield three, with Ogbene, Fosu either side of Jordan Hugill, of course, who makes his Carrow Road return. Their subs bench, Hemfrey, Peltier, Hergelde, Odoffin, Queena, Ferguson and Kelly. What do you make of Teemu Pukki's return then, Pad? This is obviously his first start since it was announced he'd be departing the club in the summer. You mentioned the maybe concern. I don't know if concern's probably a bit strong, but certainly maybe the worrying trend that we saw when he played alongside Josh Sargent. We probably expect Sargent to play a little bit deeper this afternoon, as has been the case always when Norwich have deployed that formation. What do you make of his inclusion in the team today from David Wagner's perspective?
Well, at the risk of repeating what we've already said, it's in that scenario, if you're saying Isaac Hayden is fit enough for inclusion on the bench, but not to start, then basically Gibbs has to go in there, which then creates an opening. We've talked about Nunez, Dal we know about already. So it's really one of either or Pukki. And I think of those two, in terms of leading the line, you'd still go for Pukki, because as much as he hasn't been anywhere near it in terms of the goals this calendar year, I think his only two goals under David Wagner were the Preston game, actually, which was, tell a lie, that was early January, wasn't it? But since then, which is a very poor return for a man of his pedigree. And of course, we've got the clarity now. We probably knew it anyway, but he will be departing come what may. That might just, as I think about it, that just might free him up a little bit. That he knows it's done. He'd have known it was done himself, but the fact it's been communicated publicly to fan base now that, okay, everybody's well aware of, and he doesn't have to maybe deflect questions about his future as he was doing only a few short weeks ago. So that might free him up now. He knows he's going. I'm sure he'd want to leave on a very positive note. His legacy's intact, come what may. But given his impact on this team in this league, particularly, I wouldn't rule him out finding his goal touch again. But I just feel, that certainly him, Sargent and Eder wasn't working. But what you would say is today they've got the two wing twins in Marquinhos and Hernandez, and in that counter-attacking strategy at Ewood, they were perfect. You know, they were the foils that you needed for Sargent as it was on Friday. Now, if it's difficult to sort of hypothesise that Norwich will be counter-attacking today, because Rotherham, I would imagine, will go low block and Norwich will have the majority of the ball. So it is a different equation today, you think. But if they could get into those transition situations and you've got Marquinhos one wing, you've got Onel the other, that's the type of link-up that I think a Pukki would relish. Balls in behind, trying to catch out defences into the channels. But ultimately, I guess what we fall back on is that he's been a prolific scorer of goals in a Norwich shirt, particularly at this level, and you don't lose that. Yes, he's not the Timu Pukki of the first championship title winning season, but there's a lot of miles on the clock since then. But wouldn't it be a lovely fairy tale if he could rediscover his goal touch, and it could power Norwich into the playoffs, and then they take their chances in the playoffs. So, in terms of, is there a debate why he's starting today with the personnel available? I don't really think there is. But obviously, once if you start to get a few more options back, I certainly wouldn't like to see a revision to what we saw post Millwall, which is trying to shoehorn Sargent, Pukki, and Eder all into that front four. That clearly wasn't working, and hopefully, David Wagner and his coaches have realised that's the case. But we'd all like to deal in a positive end to Timu Pukki's Norwich career, and if he hits the goal trail today, then we might be starting to see the end of the final chapter. But if it's peppered with a goal or two, then that could be good for him, because he'll bounce on to whatever next with a bit more confidence than he probably has at the moment. But it would also possibly get Norwich into the playoffs. And then if you've got Timu Pukki, what I would say, if Timu Pukki is scoring goals in a Norwich shirt and Norwich get into the playoffs, irrespective of how the rest of the season maybe has gone for him on a personal level, his reputation alone, that will strike fear into any potential championship playoff opponent. So, he is still a tremendous asset. The end is nigh, but let's hope that there is a real positive twist in the tale, and it isn't just as it felt like it was leading to, quite a sad maybe sidelining of him. I thought the curtain was the doors were sliding when he came off the other day as Sheffield United here, and Abu Kamara came on, and then the contract news was announced. That might be the end of it, but injuries have played their part, and he's back in the mix. So what you don't doubt with him is A, his ability to score goals, but B, his professionalism. I think Zoe Webber has talked about it in the column today, the match day column. He is the ultimate professional, and one thing you can guarantee, he won't want to leave on a slightly down note. He'll be doing everything in his power, but you just hope that around him, the setup today allows him to do what we all know he can do, which is score goals at this level.
Yeah, and just finally, let's touch upon Jordan Hugill. Obviously, he returns today. I'm sure he will be extra eager to make an impression on, obviously, the club that he left in January. Very fond memories. I spoke to him after his exit a few days after, actually, and he was very complimentary about Norwich and his time in Norfolk. But no doubt, I'm sure that will be part of today as Rotherham, who are still obviously trying to cement their place in the Championship next season under Matt Taylor, will look to come here and obviously build upon what they did on Good Friday, which was a win against West Brom in pretty comprehensive fashion. Hugill, of course, scored a double. He also gave away a penalty. So Paddy, just a little bit on Jordan Hugill, and then let's kind of lead into kind of your expectations for today, and I guess finish with your score prediction as well.
Well, you're right. I mean, you spoke to him, obviously. Pretty shortly after he left. I actually interviewed him. My touch point with him that I recall the most was actually when he first walked through the door, and it was a pre-season tour. They were out in Germany. I forget which season it is now. I think it was before the second title-winning season under
2021.
Yeah, under Daniel, and I had a sit down with him, and it went on for about 40 minutes, and you just thought, very similar. I know he's talked about what a bit of a role model he was because they came from that part of the world, and very similar types of striker, but what a very Grant Holt style personality to have around the camp. As it turned out, his impact on the pitch was fairly limited. We've talked just quite at length in that last section about Timu Pukki, and ultimately found himself behind him in the pecking order. Couldn't shift him, as Adam Eder has been unable to as well. But that title-winning season, he was massive in and around the group and in the changing room, because he's a big personality, and you can see already is probably having a similar effect in that Rotherham changing room. He got his 2 goals on Friday against West Brom, 4 goals in 11 appearances. I think they were 4 points clear of the bottom 3 before today's fixtures. So it looks like it's going to work out for him on a personal level, which is getting a move to a championship club, 3 years at his age as well. Contractually, you can't argue with that. And I think David Wagner said it best on Friday. Wish him every success after today and score a bag full of goals after today. But it does concern me slightly the type of player he is and that physical element to his game that Omabama Daly and Sorensen are going to be tested in that facet of the game.
And also Gibson Sauer in front of them as well.
Exactly, yeah, because you know how direct Rotherham will want to play this and maybe cash in on set pieces. And last time here, Sheffield United, they were very vulnerable, and that was with Hanley and Gibson in the lineup. So they will be tested. But to move it on to a prediction, well, you know, now or never was what it felt like for Blackburn. They delivered. It's the same again today. And you just hope, as David said, they didn't back it up after Millwall. They need to back it up today. He's done a very big public appeal through us, mainly, to these fans to turn up today, to generate the intensity he wants to see from his players on the pitch. If those two things come together, I think they'll have too much for Rotherham, and I think they'll 2-1, 3-1 for me today. And if they do that, they're in the top 6. Come closer play tonight, and it's all there for them. And we can actually really look forward to going to Middlesbrough coming Friday, which at one point was a little bit looking through the fingernails or looking through the fingertips. But yeah, for me, I think there's, you know, irrespective of the injury issues they've got today, the momentum they should be carrying forward from Blackburn. I think they'll have too much for Rotherham today. So I'm going to go, a good Norwich win. You, Connor?
Yeah, likewise. I think Norwich will win this game today, and I think they'll win it pretty comfortably. I think they will have just too much, like you say, for this Rotherham side, who ultimately will have kind of bigger occasions to come. And as it stands, as Paddy said there, a win would still take them into the top 6. Neil Warnock's Huddersfield are holding on against Blackburn with not long left, I don't believe, 84. So not long left at all there. And it's going to be interesting to see if Norwich City end the day in the top 6, with obviously the teams around them beginning to crumble a little bit. It does feel like there's an opportunity there to seize momentum, and as Paddy said there, an opportunity to back up what they did on Friday, which would be certainly a step in the right direction. You can come and join us across all the Pinken channels throughout the afternoon, and obviously post-match for all the analysis and reaction to this game. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your bank holiday Monday, whether you're at Carrow Road or elsewhere, and we'll see you again very soon.